First Ladies of the United States. Join us as we journey through the past and observe how their lives unfold. From childhood, motherhood, to a very important role as a wife and First Lady to the United States Presidents. It will bring to light the meaning of, beside every great man, there is a great woman. Now you will have a chance to explore their past and visualize who these great ladies were that stood beside the most powerful leaders in America. You will venture into the personal lives and discover tragedy and triumph from ordinary women to extraordinary ladies. Let us begin Volume 1 with Martha Washington. Martha Dandridge Curtis was the wife and First Lady of our country's first President, George Washington. She was the First Lady from April the 30th, 1789, through March the 4th, 1797. Martha Dandridge Curtis Washington was born to John and Frances Dandridge on June the 13th, 1731, at Chestnut Grove Plantation in New Kent County, Virginia. As the eldest of 8 children born to a prosperous tobacco farmer, young Martha enjoyed a pleasant youth and eased gracefully into Virginia's high society. She was educated at home in housekeeping, dancing, music, needlework, polite conversation, and social skills, but never received any formal schooling. Though it was typical for young women of the day, she was particularly embarrassed by her lack of sophistication in grammar and spelling, and disguised it by dictating her public letters and carefully hand-copying the pages. As an adolescent, she was confident among statesmen and comfortable with politics. Legend has it that she was daring once she slapped the face of an officer for an inappropriate remark, riding her horse on the front steps of a home and pursuing wealthy tobacco farmer Daniel Parker Curtis, 20 years her senior, whom she married when she was only 17 years of age. Of the 4 children born to Martha and Daniel, 2 died in infancy. The remaining 2, Patsy and Jackie, were barely past childhood themselves when Daniel died suddenly in 1757, leaving Martha a 17,000-acre tobacco farm and several hundred slaves, and making her perhaps the wealthiest female in the colony. She was 25 years old at the time. Martha was successfully managing her estate when she met George Washington at the home of a mutual friend. He was, at the time, a British officer and commander-in-chief of Virginia's military forces. After a brief courtship, they were married in 1759. George wrote that Martha's family reacted with disgust at the news of their engagement, and many believed that the union was an arrangement of convenience rather than love. Skeptics suggested that Martha was looking for a father for her children, and that her wealth and status made her an attractive match for George. But after 40 years of marriage, Martha and George remained devoted to each other, despite the expectations of their critics. For the first 16 years of their marriage, they divided their time between Martha's estate, 6 Chimneys, and George's now famous Mount Vernon plantation. Though their marriage proved to be childless, they made a home for numerous nieces, nephews, and grandchildren. George was devoted to his stepchildren, and when Patsy died at the age of 17 and Jackie at 26, he was nearly as grief-stricken as Martha. Following Jackie's death, George and Martha adopted 2 of Jackie's children. As George's career drew him first to the battlefield and then to the presidency, Martha remained at his side. During the Revolutionary War, she made trips each winter to visit his military headquarters with food and supplies from Mount Vernon. She was a prominent presence in the military camps, boosting morale, tending to the sick and wounded soldiers, comforting her troubled husband, serving as his secretary and confidant, and still managing to oversee the successful operation of Mount Vernon. However, George was afraid that Martha might be kidnapped from the plantation as a war hostage, but she remained fearless. Some believed it was because of this concern that George allowed her to remain at the battlefront with him. The war's end did not mean peace for Martha and George Washington. By the time George was elected to the presidency in 1789, Martha was a 57-year-old grandmother and longed for a more private life with George at their beloved Mount Vernon. She did not celebrate when the messenger arrived at Mount Vernon with the news that her husband had been elected the first president of the United States. Though never truly happy as First Lady, Martha did not resent George for obeying the voice of his country, and sustained herself by stubbornly holding to her conviction that the greater part of our happiness or misery depends upon our dispositions and not our circumstances. Despite Martha's hesitation, she filled the role of President's wife with grace and dignity, and was popular and well-loved by the public. She hosted customary receptions and social events in the formal European style, but with an air of warmth and hospitality that set her guest at ease. Abigail Adams, who Martha always seated to her immediate right at dinner and receptions, described her as modest and dignified, one of those characters which create love and esteem. The Washingtons never lived in the White House. Its construction was not completed until after the end of their administration. Instead, they moved to New York City, the nation's first capital, and the following year relocated to the second temporary capital, Philadelphia, where Martha found society a bit more pleasing. Finally, in 1797, much to Martha's relief and delight, the Washingtons retired from public life and returned to Mount Vernon, where they spent the remaining of their 2 years together. Following George's death from pneumonia in 1999, Martha protected their privacy by carefully burning all but a few of his letters to her. She moved out of the bedchambers that they shared at Mount Vernon and into a smaller downstairs room. When Martha died at the age of 70 on May the 22nd, 1802, all slaves at Mount Vernon were freed according to her will. She and George lie buried together in a Mount Vernon tomb.